We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. All right, so today we are going to be digging into Revature. So when people, just to give you an idea, what Revature is for aspiring developers, how do I want to start off? Okay, we'll start off with this. Revature claims to, basically what Revature does is have you sign a 2-year contract. It provides training. It claims to pay you for that training and then place you into positions. You get real world experience. That's what Revature is about. That's the gist of it from what I've gotten. And so a lot of you have kind of come to my live streams once in a while asking about it. I usually recommend that you check out Joshua Fluke's video. Is a really good, sometimes Joshua doesn't do tons of research, but with Revature, it did feel like he put some serious time into it. So check out his video. I'm going to go summarize a few things from his video. We're going to dive into even more, and I'm going to share why we're even doing this in the first place. So, Dark Classic Gamer, short answer, no. Long answer, hell no. Horace, how you doing? Welcome. All right, so why am I diving into Revature a little bit? I wanted to do a podcast episode. My normal podcast episodes, I invite up to 3 people on. I want honest, transparent experiences. And very quickly, I was told by many of Revature's staff, or their software engineers that signed the contract, that they signed something in their contract that prevented them from sharing their experience. That's a fucking red flag. That is a huge red flag. So, you hear that breaking the clause of Revature. I've seen the range, I think, from 20,000 to 35,000 software engineers. If it's not a mutual break, software engineers will now owe Revature about that amount of money. I don't know what it currently is, but I think it's within that range. But when you break contracts like that, depending on how damaging your words are, lawsuits can reward well over $20,000, $35,000, depending on how much money you have in the bank, what assets you have. So to me, that's a red flag, and it's reason enough where I no longer trust Revature. I no longer trust a lot of the reviews, especially this is definitely a situation where I am going to scrap all 5-star reviews. I'm going to scrap all 1-star reviews. We're going to dive into just tons of stuff that people are saying about Revature and kind of my idea with it and whether I think you should do it as a software engineer. So I actually have been telling people, if you are really desperate for a job, you don't have a family, you don't have obligations, you don't have student debt, then potentially consider Revature. If you're resourceful and you can live off very, very, very little money. I've since changed that stance. It's now very different. I don't recommend that anymore, and I'm going to show you why. All right, so we're going to dive into some stuff, reviews that I found, and I'm going to go ahead and just share some articles. So this is just how I do research. I'm going to show you just what I look up. I don't have any secret facts. Now, one thing I want to state before I share my screen, I've thought about just reaching out to Revature staff and getting a bunch of anonymous reviews. I am not fully confident where that leaves me liability-wise. I'm not fully confident that I can protect the guests. We could bring in anonymous messages, but me soliciting feedback when they've signed a contract and me knowing that, I'm honestly not sure liability-wise where that leaves me. So every 3 months, I talk to my attorney, little consultation. I just write down questions all throughout those 3 months, and I'll spend a half an hour, below $500 on attorneys because they're really expensive. And then I'll just ask a bunch of these questions. So that's what I'm going to do. So that means we're going to dig into it a little bit. And if my attorney has enough confidence in me soliciting the advice and just seeing the legality of it, I could even figure out a way to get guests on and have them still be anonymous, which could be interesting. Could be a really fun podcast episode, but we'll see. I'm going to talk to my attorney about that. For now, we're going to dig into it. Hey, Mike, I hated my job. I was considering Revature. The fact that you didn't know where they would send you made me reconsider. Yeah. So what are, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. Before I even share my screen, we're going to sum up some of what Joshua already researched. And I had some people share some stuff with me. So, very high buyout. What I hear is if you get fired, if it's basically a mutual termination, you don't owe the amount. I've seen some people say that they're not going to charge you. I've seen some people say that they definitely do charge you. Be careful. But mutual termination, I think someone recommended if you get fired, you don't have to pay that fee. I don't know if that's true. I wouldn't trust that. But usually people are seeking a mutual termination when they realize Revature isn't what was sold to them. You know, a lot of people complain about the relocation, right? And so referencing what Joshua Fluke did some research on, they technically potentially will pay you for relocation. So this is from reviews that I've seen, and including what Joshua Fluke said. It looks like sometimes they will offer to pay for relocation, like really low. I saw like amounts of like $500 to relocate you across the United States, which is ridiculously low. That is pathetic. They do not give a shit about anyone that they are offering $500 for relocation fees, which doesn't, you can't bring your stuff with $500 across the United States. Like, good luck finding a truck service at this time to be able to do that. Including the deposit. You know, when you do buy an apartment, including the deposit, including sometimes, depending on your credit, they could ask a month or two of rent up front. How the hell do you pay that? And so I've also seen some reviews of Revature employees saying that, oh, it's not $500. Sometimes it will give you $500. And if they give you additional, it's an advance, which means basically comes out of what they were going to pay you for working as a developer. Advance is very different. I think people have a big misconception of what they're actually offering for the move. So I would be careful of that. A few more things. I've seen people say that, at least in their contract and what they've heard from other people, sometimes you're shoved into a non-developer role. We've had coding boot camps that do that to boost up their numbers and promise you, if you go to this QA position, I promise you it's a gateway into becoming a software engineer, which is 99% bullshit. So let's think about this. You are willing to relocate anywhere inside the United States, which means you're not married. You don't have a family. You don't have obligations. You don't have debt. You are one of the very few people in the United States that hasn't accrued debt, because the United States loves to push this idea of, if you want to build your credit, if you want to look great in the eyes of lenders and employers, you have to go into debt. This is the dumbest system any country has. So, if you are one of the few people that aren't in debt, congratulations. Revature might be a consideration for you. Most people, you might want to get that squared away before you ever even look at a company like Revature. So, and also I've heard people say that, you know, if your job does end, it wasn't like a termination, but sometimes roles will become obsolete, right? Companies downsize, where you're reduced back to close to minimum wage, and you're waiting. Good luck paying your apartment. Maybe you get an advance, a loan off the employer that has you trapped in a two-year contract. So what else? This is kind of just like a surface level summary of stuff that I've looked at so far. Revature, I need to explore this more, but I heard Revature had multiple campuses, and they might have multiple campuses in different states. I don't know which state they're situated in. I don't know where their headquarters is. That's something to definitely look up. But in every state has regulations with education, all right? But Revature isn't an educational company, from what I understand. And they claim so, and people have asked them, are you a coding boot camp, you know? And so you have state regulations around vocational schools and just additional education. It's my impression that they get to dodge all these regulations, which help protect and give you fair refund policies and quality of education, ensure that. So, from what I understand, if they aren't registered as like a vocational school with the state, they can dodge a lot of that. So the promises that are given aren't backed up by the state. So there are a lot of issues with coding boot camps trying to dodge state regulations, and sometimes they get caught, and you hear about news stories about that. If you are not an educational company, which I believe you are learning it within 2.5 months, I think it's 10 weeks. Fuck your rights. Like, fuck the quality of education. They don't have to guarantee you anything. Who's holding them accountable? The type of people, in my opinion, that are going to go for Revature are very desperate, probably don't have a lot of money. If you are willing to accept minimum wage to get training, and then I think they advertise like $45,000 to $55,000 salaries, which I saw a big chunk of their jobs in big cities, that's not a lot of money to be able to survive. That is not a lot of money. I feel like I'm just venting, and I feel like right now we need to explore a little bit. So that's what we're going to do. Answer to your title, no. Well, I appreciate you answering that question. All right, so let's dive into it. I'm going to scrap some of this, but we're just going to dive into it. I'm going to show you how I do my research. But there is research that I recommend that you do, and I'll kind of recommend that at the end. But we're going to go from the stance of who should seriously consider Revature. And I'm going to state this again because I think my review on Revature is going to be based on that. Someone who doesn't have a family, that doesn't have commitments, that can be relocated to anywhere in the United States, no guarantee of a job income that will actually support you based on your living expenses. It's a lot of uncertainty. I say get comfortable with uncertainty, but this is a stupid amount of uncertainty. When you lock yourself on a contract like this isn't just saying, okay, you know, I don't know when I'm going to get a developer job, but it'll happen eventually, and I just have to keep pushing forward. This is not that situation. You are signing a very serious contract with a very hefty penalty for leaving it. This is entrapment, in my opinion. So you need to be very, very careful because this feels very, very predatory. But if you have no commitments, if you have no family, you're willing to relocate, you're resourceful enough to be able to, I would say frugal enough to be able to take big hits if you lose your job, if your pay is reduced, because I don't believe you do control your pay, then it might be worth considering. Now, the one last final note is this education is forced within about 10 weeks, from what I understand. Very, very intense from what I hear. Very hard training. Several people drop out. Very little free time. You need, like even with coding boot camps, there's a reason why they don't completely fill your Saturdays and Sundays with education. You can, as a human being, we're very capable of putting the hours in and grinding things out, but that doesn't mean you're going to retain the information. So a lot of the reviews that we're going to be seeing, it's going to show training is very, very hard. Yeah, because they're cramming everything in to be job ready within 10 weeks, which is extremely unrealistic. Like outside of Revature is very unique. Outside of Revature, I would never recommend anyone take education like that seriously. I've seen what it happens when you cram that education in less than 3 months, and even 3 months at this point, because the bar is going up for junior developers full time. Still, usually people need more than 3 months to be able to condense it, even just putting 60 hours a week in. So the fact that they're cramming this information makes me feel like a lot of their developers probably struggle on fundamentals and probably struggle on picking up new technologies because they don't get a solid shot, the appropriate amount of time, and so the appropriate amount of time to learn the material, decompress, think about it critically, and the break to be able to let their mind rest enough to try to retain it, to try to understand it, to try to apply it to practical applications. I would never, ever recommend a 10-week program like this condensed and you being job ready. If you are sold that promise, be careful. Be very careful. All right, so let's catch up with chat, and then we're going to share my screen. We'll dive into it. It's for the most desperate people. And so, yeah, and that's what I used to say. I've had people come to me that are very desperate financially. My advice has shifted over the year. My advice will never be to you to try to cram the material, try to condense it down and hit that goal, to grind it out. That is a terrible way of becoming a software engineer. You're not going to retain most of what you're learning. The more you cram, the less you're going to retain. When people are desperate, they make very stupid decisions. That pressure weighs on them. They don't retain what they're learning. If you are desperate, you should not be aiming for a software engineering position in the short term. That is one of the worst positions you can make. Software engineering is not a solution to your financial problems. Your budget, figuring out a good budget, managing your personal finances, and having just some sort of stable job, well, stable, whatever that means nowadays, having even a part-time job and pairing those part-time jobs together, you are going to stand a better chance of surviving and getting to where you need to be versus, oh, I got to learn all this material in 2 months and get a job within a month. That's all I have, and I'm super desperate, but I'm just going to dedicate 80 hours a week into it. It's not going to work out for you. Get your financial situation stable. If you are financially desperate, in my opinion, Revature is a terrible solution for you. It is not going to help your financial situation, and we'll dive into that. So I don't believe that this program is for desperate people anymore. I believe that this program is for people that don't give a shit. People that aren't necessarily financially responsible or don't care. There are much better solutions than Revature. This is no longer for people that are desperate. It just isn't. I think a lot of developers put a lot of pressure to get that job quickly because of financial pressure. You need to solve that financial pressure before you take the career transition seriously. Hello. I'm a career changer, had seen Revature, didn't really like the sound of it. I just want to jump in, learn, and start a new career. What route would you suggest? Code Academy, LinkedIn Learning. One thing I can LinkedIn Learning. I usually don't make recommendations, but I would actually recommend to stay away from that. I don't think it's worth the price at all. I usually don't make recommendations, but I have a really strong opinion on that. Jacqueline, I have tons of reviews on so many coding programs. You just got to find the one that's right for you. Great topic. Thank you. I'm pretty cynical, but even I have a hard time believing a court wouldn't throw out a boot camp trying to sue someone for leaving bad feedback. And so it depends on what you're leaving, right? When you mix education with potentially confidential information, because it's not an educational program. That's not really what they preach. It's more of it's a bridge to getting a job. It's basically closer to employment than it is education. It's job training. And so when you talk about job training, companies can it's very interesting what companies can claim as confidential information. You have to be very careful about that. I wouldn't bet on a court tossing that case out. I would seriously, if you are seriously trying to leave that contract or get out of it, talk to the manager at Revature, but consult an attorney. Like before you even go into this, when you are delivered that contract, I literally would consult an attorney and have them look over that contract so you know exactly what you're getting into. I think it's very careless to take the advice of, they probably won't do anything about it. Do not go into Revature with that mindset. What is Revature? You could Google that. But you will find a lot of jobs. It's basically like a job transitioning program. It's that provides job training. Not going to lie, Revature is something I considered a year and change ago. All right. Let's dive into it. Let me share my screen. We're going to look at some reviews. That's all we're going to do. A really simple process. I think that should do it. Yo, there we go. Okay. So I did provide some tabs, but this might be up to an hour and a half stream. We're going to dive into it. And I kind of want to look at the reviews. I'm probably going to toss a lot of 5-star reviews out the window like I usually do. And then we're going to look at the 2-star to 4-star. And again, 1-star, usually emotional. I did find a 5-star that actually provided some cons as well, which I was impressed with. You don't really find that often. So it's hard. The thing is, it's really hard to know what reviews are fake and what aren't. But usually, in my opinion, you don't have to worry that much about reviews being fake or not, but it's more of how emotionally driven and biased are they. I think that's a bigger concern if you want to get the gist of whether Revature is going to be right for you. If you want to find a relatable story, a relatable review that you feel like will apply to you. Paid training, you will work outside. You will be working outside of work for the most of the training, unpaid. For most unpaid, what? Okay, that didn't make much sense. I mean, if they are literally preventing software engineers, at least that's what I was told, if they're preventing software engineers from sharing their stories, companies usually aren't going to prevent the positive reviews. They're not going to stay on top of that. It's more negative and trying to shut that down. So let's dive into some of the negatives. I'm going to see if these 1-stars are BS. Help you build a portfolio, do projects, get leave or be dismissed early. Communication between staff is terrible. Training is said to run 8 hours. It seemed like they're in a rush. So the gist I got from Revature, when I was reading a lot of reviews, you can have a good trainer, you can have a bad trainer. It sounds like they have a quality control problem of who they hire as far as trainers go. And I think that was a common theme I saw in a lot of reviews. Pays minimum wage of whatever state you are working in. Weekly assessments. The projects are given to you in a short time span. They expect you to do everything they asked. They really just expect you to know everything. Texas, you will get $8 an hour. You'll spend most of your time teaching yourself, working on projects. I also heard and saw a lot of comments mimicking that it was highly self-taught. Like you did kind of had trainers, but it was 90%, 99% on you to teach yourself a lot of this stuff. Program is more for college graduates with a degree. See, that right there is no. If you have any debt coming out of college, I highly recommend you stay the hell away from this program. Highly recommend it. Developers are capable of getting positions. A lot of developers are capable of actually getting positions they just give up too soon. And that's how a lot of like coding boot camps will scoop developers up. Some of the smart students, usually coding boot camps will scoop up software engineers that were some of the smartest students that can give back and be good mentors. When the smartest students are usually the ones that can get a job very, very quickly. They're the exception. They're not the average. And so recruiting someone with a CS degree, with a 4-year CS degree, if you don't feel confident enough to get the position, this just feels like manipulation. This feels like if they are targeting, I don't know if this review is true, right? This is all speculation, but if they are targeting people that get out of a CS degree, they're more than capable of getting that position. They might have to put some more time into their portfolio and showcase relevant recent skills or recent technologies, but this feels like the predatory nature of what coding boot camps do to scoop up the smartest students that absolutely, they make students, or some coding boot camps make students feel like we're giving you a gift, right? We're selecting you out of this whole class that applied because everyone's just desperate for a job at this point. And you are one of the smartest students. We'd love to have you. And they make you feel welcome and included. And that's what this feels like if they are scooping, like if there's a reputation around, oh yeah, this program's really good if you kind of have a solid foundation. It's like, no, if you have a solid foundation, like this program should be even more off limits for you. I do know someone that had a decent experience with them, but they mentioned that they were one of the few lucky ones where their contract was straight up bought so employers can buy the contracts, which I think is what a lot of people hope for, and they buy you out of that contract. And so that's, Emily, you're right about that. And I've seen reviews like that, but it's very often when you see reviews, like when you see 5-star reviews saying, Revature isn't a scam, Revature isn't that bad. When you have to preface your review with saying something like that, you are definitely exception to the rule. And that should send up a red flag in your head where people have to try to recover Revature's reputation because so many other people had really shitty experiences. When you see reviews saying Revature isn't that bad, that should send a red flag up in your head right away. But there are people that do have decent experiences. Thank you for all of the content, wonderful content, in-depth reviews of all these programs. You're welcome, Luke. I appreciate you just being here. All right, so stay away. I'm going to see if anything catches my attention because I feel like I did a lot of research and a lot of it's just in the back of my mind. So we're going to do this for maybe about like 20, 25 minutes. We're going to look at some of this stuff, and I just want to see if anything catches my attention with what I found. So paid training comes at a cost. You're locked into your contract clauses. All this we know. There's plenty of other boot camps that help you get your foot through the door. So this is basically like a $30,000 around that coding boot camp. This is a very expensive coding boot camp. So Rhythm School has a really interesting offer. It's a very expensive coding boot camp, but they do offer real internship experience. I don't think they lock you into any sort of contract. It's the contract that gets people. It's a contract that should be setting up red flags in your head. The real world experience can be helpful, but I'd seen several reviews of people saying that sometimes you might not even be in a coding role. You see this all the time where people have coding related titles, technical titles, but they're not actually, they went through the program to become a software engineer and they're kind of like they're QA, they're like an automated testing engineer. It's not like really software engineering. And I would be curious how many people have gotten locked into stuff like that, or what the contract even says about that. Before you sign, ask about Infosys. They have a different deal with them. Oh, and the contract would be different. I did see some with Infosys when I was reaching out to graduates. I do hear decent benefits. It's one thing I hear. One second. I'm going to close my window, actually. There we go. Neighbors being loud. All right, so what else? There are no good reasons unless you really can't find a job. Pros salary. Wouldn't recommend though. 1 star. A lot of work. Okay, I don't see. These are stupid reviews. This is why I avoid 1 star. Revature treats internal staff like crap. Been here for multiple years. Works you like a dog, and there's a lot of turnover these days. Currently looking. So big thing is a lot of people feel overworked. Hate coming into work. Let's see if we can jump to. Is there any way to jump to like 2 star? Let's do recent reviews. A lot of relevant information is buried under a lot of irrelevant. They trim their live Q&A information as well. They've definitely trimmed their live Q&A, or not their live Q&A, their Q&A section on their website. They were able to answer some of the controversial questions, but I couldn't find that on their current website. Course is very intense. Excellent skill set. And it was a particularly good time as they are doing everything remotely. So this could be a big benefit. I don't know if they're still doing it remotely. The relocation is a big, big con, and the lack of control you have over that, that's incredibly important. So if they are still doing it remotely, I wouldn't, if they promise that they're going to continue doing it remotely, I wouldn't count on that. But people that did go into it in 2020 might have had a better time just working remote the entire time. Can kiss your weekdays goodbye. As programming course, be frustrated, be very frustrated. Okay. Let's go with the popular reviews. And then I had a couple articles I want to check out. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time scrolling, so I'm just trying to find certain stuff. Good place to work when you don't have any experience. You will be working outside. Is that the same review that keeps popping up, or am I just going over the same review? Fast-paced, mandatory relocation, uncertainty, time, learning opportunities, project-based training. I mean, that's always good. New tech, training is very challenging, but you learn when you are challenged. Friendly staff, because it's challenging, it takes a lot of time. These are fairly positive reviews. These are 5-star. Great BA training, associate business analyst. Business analyst? What? Did we not? Here, let's do software engineer. Junior software engineer. 4-star. Less than a year. I wonder if more positive reviews came in without the relocation being a thing. Salesforce. Why are you working on Salesforce? I think a lot of companies try to make it look like you're working at a software engineering position when you're working on like very proprietary stuff, and like you're doing like you're building logical components and processes, but you're not really coding. Salesforce, you can get stuck not doing as much coding as you had expected. 30-ish people. We ended up with 20. Currently, it's entirely remote. So I just recently heard about the clause in their contract of... This is interesting, because I recently heard about the clause in their contract where they couldn't share the reviews, because I feel like I didn't hear about that before. I wonder how recent that is. That can definitely curb negative reviews. Contract is horrendous, and in my case and some other coworkers, they were forced to sign an addendum which released them from employing us, but we were still under the 2-year obligation to our new company. We are no longer employed at Revature, and they still send us emails requesting us to relocate. We are still on the hook for $30,000 if we leave our new job within that 2 years. Denim is certainly illegal. I don't know about that. Would have a near impossible time holding up an arbitration. I think a lot of people play attorney, and they really don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I highly recommend with that contract you put money into an attorney before you make any serious decisions based on that contract. Started training with 30 people. Some people were let go on the first project. If you can't keep up with the pace of the training or expectations, they are not afraid to let you go. You will probably blow yourself up multiple times and spend a lot of excess time outside of work hours trying to get the projects done. Know that I blew myself up twice, meaning I burnt myself out. There's never enough time to get the requirements done in class. I hear a lot of people drop out of the classwork. Communication wasn't great with Revature. A lot of people, including our trainer and the people handling. Why does that sound? That's a word. It just sounds weird. Handling our quizzes and our exams to make sure we stayed on track, didn't know when important things like our quizzes would be done. So I've also seen a lot of common reviews around them, like people passing through the curriculum when they weren't really prepared, when they didn't really understand the material. Maybe they've gotten better over the last year. I honestly, I know these reviews say that, but I was finding a lot of negative ones. We just have to get to them. So maybe, I do think being remote, I think it makes a difference because the big con was the relocation and people feeling like they were financially screwed and trapped and had no resolution towards that whatsoever. So I think being remote has given people more options and a little bit less financial pressure. So that could be a thing. You're welcome, Z. Hey, Hologram. Welcome back. How you doing, buddy? But low paid training could have to relocate. Yeah, relocation is... I feel like, relocation was a big con. I wonder... Is Revature online? Remote pandemic. I don't know. Maybe we can find it in a review. We'll look at 2 more pages. These are the popular ones, right? Okay, cool. Train get very heavy. If you don't meet their requirements, they will release you from the pro. So this actually doesn't sound that bad. Like releasing sounds like a mutual termination almost, right? I don't know if you're guaranteed that. And I did read a lot of reviews of people being pushed through the curriculum even if they weren't prepared and tossed into jobs not feeling prepared. And you can find those reviews. But being tossed from the program and getting out of your contract with some education isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. It's still remote? Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, that does knock one con out the window. Tough work, great opportunities, degree, but no network to get into a big company. I'm not the best at budgeting. Most people aren't. Much better than paying for a boot camp, that's for sure. Training is great. Promissory note for $36K, payback, training or 2 years at set salary, no guarantee. On training program, promised Java, full stack, but given Salesforce. So we're seeing more of the Salesforce training. That's bullshit. If you're signing up as a software engineer, I have seen reviews where it feels like they weren't in control of what they were learning, and it feels like they have multiple paths for you to go down, and you don't necessarily have the control to choose. I'd be interested in taking a deeper look at that contract to see what options you have, but I have seen a lot of reviews kind of just being tossed into these off positions, these off paths that aren't really going to help you become a software engineer. Fail certification 1 time, pay out of pocket 2nd time. Oh, interesting. All right, option for people with no experience or unrelated degrees looking to enter software. Anyone else should look elsewhere. If you have a thick skin and are willing to ignore the unreasonable expectations, plan to work 9 to 5 like any other job, and you'll come out with plenty of experience. People heavily exaggerate the difficulty of the training. While dozens of technologies were introduced, minimal actual knowledge was expected in favor of memorizing a few interview trivia questions. That's literally it. That's their grading criteria to determine if you're qualified. So all the people that are getting fired or not prepared for their positions, when I see those in reviews, I think this is starting to paint a bigger picture, more solidified story of why that's happening. Huh. It almost sounds like they kind of just push you through that education as a checkbox. I would be curious to hear companies' opinions about hiring Revature employees. I think a really interesting thing that you could do is look where the Revature positions are. I think it just says Revature. It doesn't say the company. That'd be tricky because comparing where the Revature positions are and what companies are hiring Revature employees, and then compare it 6 months down the road to what companies are still, which companies are still hiring Revature employees and which said, screw this, we're not hiring any more Revature employees. So I think it'd be a good idea to ask them that kind of question of I doubt they have this, but what percentage of companies decide to hire a Revature employee 6 months, a year down the road? How long do their contracts last with employees before the companies give up on them? That will show you, be a good indicator of the quality of their education. And all this should just be used to formulate questions. If they feel disingenuous, if it doesn't feel authentic, use your gut feeling when you talk to these advisors. I remember Joshua Fluke's, he couldn't even get a hold of Revature. He called multiple numbers, and I believe one was on their website. He couldn't get a hold of anyone. I think a lot of us can relate to, if you really can't get a hold of customer service, it very much, that first call or that first attempt to do so, if it takes a long time, that could be a legitimate indicator of what communication is going to be like with that company. How much do they prioritize that open communication and being available? Some companies will prioritize sales. Some companies will sales calls. Some companies will prioritize internal calls, and they will dedicate more time for employees. But I don't know. To me, it just gives me a bad feeling when you can't even reach the company to contact them and ask them questions. I've seen a lot of reviews say that the managers, when you would pressure them with kind of tough questions like this, they would become dodgy. We'll see if we can find any of those reviews. But it feels like when they're presented with very tough questions, they find a way to wiggle around some of this and not really give a straight answer. Or some people, I saw some reviews saying they kind of were able to get themselves out of the contract because they pressured management to answer some of these questions and why they were getting screwed over financially. And so all of this is speculation. It's literally all people on the internet saying this stuff. So I can't say all of this is for certain, but there are a lot of common reviews that paint a picture. I don't recommend any specific course. You got to do your own research, Marion. I remember reading that they value teaching you soft skills more towards the end to make sure you get into a company. That's interesting, Emily, because I remember reviews before this. I saw that soft skills were neglected and it was focused on nothing but technical. I wonder if they started working on that. I'm sure they've gotten feedback if they were terrible with that. All right. Thanks for letting me know, Ludo. Do you mind if I just read this out loud? Or do you want me to just read it by myself, Ludo? The DM that you just sent me. Contract, let's see. My wife went through 4 weeks of the training program. The very first part was a weed out process and not a teaching process. Interesting. I wonder what they used to weed people out. Contract was for $45K for the first year, $55K for the second year, and then $75K for the third. What city was that? But after coming out, she didn't have to pay anything. They're really nice about letting you go without the payment for training. That's not what I saw in other reviews. I saw a lot of reviews, people really mad about that. That's good that, like I've seen in the reviews, sometimes you get a good trainer, sometimes you get a good manager. And I think it all depends. No problem. Go for it. Okay. Memphis, Tennessee. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for sharing. Whoops. Splenda, welcome. We're going over Revature right now, but at the end, if you're still around, we can answer those questions. Sure. What's the Spark program, Akil? What exactly is a Spark program? All right, so Ludo, here's another perspective with the limits placed on H-1B and L-1 visa. The major outsources from India, Infosys, Tata, etc., are very limited in their ability to bring in their staff from India and the U.S. They used to sell to company IT departments their outsourcing services. This way, small Indian team in the U.S. that will be managing a big dev team in India, often with questionable dev skills. So lots of resources for cheap, plus the benefits for these U.S. companies to have cheap on-site individuals. So these big India outsourcers are now recreating their low-wage workforce by hiring and training U.S. people. There is a big problem with software engineers getting underpaid and mistreated in a lot of software engineering and tech companies. That is a huge problem. Maybe we should dive into that. That would be a really interesting thing to dive into in a live stream. And when you word it like that, this does feel like a legal solution to be able to provide low-wage workers in the United States. That's an interesting perspective. Which in a way is a great thing if we accept to see U.S. individuals treated like the low-wage folks who used to come from India. A great thing. What? You'll see the partners for Revature and other apprenticeship-like companies are partnering with these outsourcers from India. Interesting. Okay. I think we should dive into, for a live stream, we'll dive into some of the culture in India at tech companies. It's terrible. It's just awful. I used to mentor a couple people from India, and just some of the experiences I heard from manager and the way they interview people, it feels like I don't know where the source comes from, but the way the culture has been curated at a lot of businesses, a lot of tech firms, it feels very predatory. It feels very abusive. That would be a fun live stream. Maybe we should do that at one point. All right, so we'll finish this review and then go to a couple of the other articles. Frequent lies during the recruitment process. Most notably, you will not receive more than minimum wage until only training completes. Yeah, that's the gist I got out of it. But you begin work with a client. Client selection process is painfully slow, and during the time, nearly everyone selected a wait between 1 to 2 months to begin work and get a raise past minimum. So I wonder if relocation is not going to happen until you get that contract with the client, right? I would assume so. Closely related, awful pay. I mean, because I saw a lot of jobs in big cities. I'd be interested to see. That's the tricky thing. I think contracts should deliver a pay that's relative to the cost of living in your local area. I think that's completely fine. And we could argue, like, I don't know how I feel about that for remote positions. I see the pros and cons, and that's a live stream in itself. But yeah, when you hear like 45 to 55,000, that could either be okay or that could be absolutely terrible, and you're like close to poverty. It depends like where you live. Revature, hold on. 2 years only ticks down while you're working with it. What? Whoa, what? Hold on. 2-year contract. Note that plus recruiters will act like placement will happen almost immediately after training, and it won't. That 2 years only ticks down while you're working with a client. So expect the actual commitment to be a minimum of 2 years and 3 months, up to far longer if your client project ends or you're otherwise benched. Are you kidding me? What happens if you're fired? What happens if you lose your job? Does that time frame of the contract, does it pause? Basically, do they extend that contract because you aren't working? There's no way we wouldn't hear more about that if that happened. But this is horrible. Revature can and will sell your contract. They will tell you you're forced to agree legally. You're not, or you'll be charged an extremely large fine. Your 2 years will begin going, well, I don't know. It depends on what's in your original contract. I don't know, even like when your shares are transferred at a startup, when your startup is bought out, sometimes there are clauses to, sometimes you'll get clauses to immediately like dish out those shares, dish out what potentially can happen to your job. Sometimes the investment that you made and the shares that you're going to get from the company, God, I'm so bad with this kind of stuff. So I feel like I'm just talking out of my ass. But I do know there are contracts, like there are things in contracts as far as like when companies get bought out, which your contract would get bought out, where sometimes things will change in your contract or they will hold consistent. So I don't think it's a good idea to automatically assume that you won't be charged a fee if you don't accept. Again, this this contract needs to be put in front of an attorney. You know what would be really interesting? I wonder if people would enjoy this. So presenting a contract publicly, like if I presented it on YouTube, I was talking with my attorney about this, and there are things that I need to watch out for and things that I can get away with in which it wouldn't be like some copyright breach. I don't have the specifics on that. Do not take my advice, my legal advice seriously. This is not legal advice. But I think I want to have a longer conversation to see if I'm able to leak contracts and what liability I incur with that. Because diving into what these contracts actually say, and like I literally could just pay an attorney to we'll go over the contract. It'd be well worth it because my revenue is starting to go up on YouTube videos, and I could pay an attorney to point out specific clauses in the contract that you what they actually mean and what you should be aware of. When you hear a lot of this stuff, just be careful about taking advice, legal advice like this. Be very careful about that though. Repeated empty threats of release and an unenforceable contract that values Revature training at nearly the cost of a bachelor's degree. The fact that a $30,000 fine is used as a motivational tool is actually disgusting. You are right about that. Extremely poor and unprofessional team for finding clients after training. Reasonable questions such as where am I moving or when should I expect to be placed with a client were entirely ignored. Poorly adapted to remote work. Training quality suffered and the management structure was ineffective. I was frequently given conflicting instructions from different members of management. HR would say entirely different things. You won't be expected to work more than 8 hours a day, LOL, to cover the company legally. The company lies about associate experience, and we were encouraged to add several months to years of experience with technologies we were trained on for single days to our portfolios. The company lies about associate experience, and we were encouraged to add several months to years of experience with technologies we were trained on for single days to our portfolios. Interesting. So what this review is saying, they're encouraging you to lie to make their candidates look more qualified. Advice to management, just be ethical, fix your contracts, make your terms clear, make it clear training is 8 hours a day max. You expect them to be clear about this when they have clauses in their contract that scare people from even sharing about their experiences? Dude, you are expecting too much from this company. You're seriously going to end up with a lawsuit for unpaid wages, and stop threatening employees with termination and fines. Prove the onboarding process or give employees a raise after they're selected. I don't know. The reviews that keep saying these contracts are illegal, I haven't heard any specific clauses or the way they do things to where I think their attorneys and their executive management are very, very smart about what they do. You can argue a lot of what's being done is unethical, and I would agree with that, but I feel like with how much they've expanded across the United States. Actually, have they raised any money? I didn't look into that. But I feel like their attorneys and their executive team know exactly what they're doing. And I wouldn't trust that some breach, or not some breach, but some powerful attorney is going to show them who's boss and take them to court. I don't think people are going to get we would have heard of something like that, right? If you guys hear of any court cases, let me know. I feel like Revature is very, very clever and smart about how they curated all of this. I think they're very smart about it. So I think a lot of this is like their contracts do feel unethical, but this is why you need to this is a contract you need to put in front of an attorney and have them read it before you sign it. And the problem is, this is why it's predatory, is because a lot of people, the reputation is, if you're desperate, yeah, go ahead and choose Revature. If you really have no other options, choose Revature. The people that have no options usually are financially desperate. That's why this feels very, very predatory. It just the whole situation just feels disgusting. And you literally are taking a chance. I don't think all these positive reviews are false or made up, but I think your experiences very much vary. And when your experiences vary this much, I don't know if that sentence is correct, but when you see so much variations around these reviews and the reputation around Revature, the safest thing that you can do is lean on the more negative reviews. Be more cynical and be more aware of what could happen, especially if you're signing a contract. The reason why I don't care about, the few people that do have positive experiences is because I want people to be prepared legally into what they're getting themselves into. So, man, this whole thing it feels disgusting. It really does. Is there a level of accountability in boot camps? Depends, Marion. Accountability from whom? Are you talking about state regulation with coding boot camps in general? Or are you talking about generally do coding boot camps hold themselves accountable? Spark program is a 4-week pre-employment boot camp for Revature before you take their technical interview. Do you have to sign any contract with that? 4-week pre-employment boot camp for Revature before you take their technical interview. Is that when you've already signed the contract? From what you made it sound like, it sounds like before. Revature is always coming up in job searches. It's annoying. They have so many jobs all around the United States. I feel like I've applied to Revature jobs before, when I was trying to become a developer. I don't think I heard back. Yeah, that is pretty annoying. I've seen a few good reviews from small channels. Interesting. I don't think good reviews, like I said, I don't think good reviews are obsolete from this company. I do feel like people do have good experiences, but same with coding boot camps. It's when you get a variety of experiences like this, it probably doesn't represent the average person or what they can experience. But more importantly, maybe it does. But if this program, if a lot of financially desperate or desperate people are oh, this program's for me, that's what I heard, and that's a reputation being built around it, that's extremely predatory, and you need to base your decision based on covering what could happen. These people don't understand how dirty some of this legal stuff gets, and sometimes it could just be sometimes you don't have the confidence in yourself to hire an attorney and stand up, and a lot of people are pressured, especially younger people that haven't had to deal with the legal issues. They're pressured into stuff like this because they really are. I mean, a lot of this could be, we saw one of the reviews, a lot of this was pushed through fear, a lot of fear tactics to get employees to kind of back down or not bring topics up. So it doesn't mean you can't have a good experience, but when I see this many bad reviews, I mean, we're just randomly looking on Glassdoor right now. We're looking at the popular. So whatever pops up, this is just random. And already there are so many shitty reviews where it's just a huge red flag. So, all right, benefits. It did sound pretty good with benefits. I saw a lot of good reviews with that, so I don't really care to investigate that. That was the tab that I did have open. My thoughts on Revature after working for them. This was 3 years ago. We're going to read it anyways. We'll skim through it. Because I remember reading this and it sounded like I still saw recent reviews that felt like it held to some of this. So the comments are solely about Revature, not the company. One might get contracted out to. I guess we'll read all of it. It's difficult to comment on the contracted companies because there are many of them and you only ever really see one. Additionally, when reading other reviews, you should know that Revature employees are required to sign a non-disparagement. That's what it is, a non-disparagement contract. What does that mean exactly? A non-disparagement clause simply states that you won't say anything negative about the company. Get the fuck out of here. None of these reviews should be trusted. None of these reviews. Are you kidding me? Holy shit. Oh my God. We've caught some coding boot camps pressuring some. You actually get some of this in a couple coding boot camps. I got to verify their contract before I would ever state their names, but that is like a non-disparagement clause about this program. Like, if this isn't a red flag, like, you are so in over your head legally on what you need to understand with this. Like, you need to hire an attorney to look at the contract you are signing. A non-disparagement clause. So, oh my God, I thought it was like properly worded so you couldn't. You basically, like, they would try to hide it like it's confidential information because you're working for a company, and, you know, they would link what you had to say with something that could be, in a court of law, like, considered something that's confidential information that you leaked. A non-disparagement clause is way different. It's way different. That is so fucked up. Holy shit. That is so fucked up. Yeah, Mike, no choice. Where you're played. Maybe you can, like, put in a request or something like that, but majority of reviews are like, you can just be put anywhere they didn't feel like they had a lot of control. Yeah, that's so screwed up that they put that in there. Why isn't it regulated accountability from instructors, students? Well, I mean, like, Revature in general, like, it's not considered like a vocational school coding boot camp that I know of, so they can dodge state regulations. But some coding boot camps, it depends on the state. Some states like California and New York, I think, have stronger restrictions on what coding boot camps can get away with. So it really all depends. Oh, sorry, Akil. Message deleted by Nightbot. I guess some messages are getting deleted. It's the Spark. Oh, because you're on italics? Spark program is 4 week. Oh, no, I think it deleted all of... Oh, okay. I got to get rid of that rule for Nightbot. Sorry about that. Oh, you were just timed out for 5 seconds. That's not a big deal. But yeah, that's just a moderation thing that I don't think is a good rule. I'll probably get rid of it soon. All right. Revature reached out to me via Indeed. It was weird. Oh, did they? What did they say? God. All right. So we have a non-disparagement clause. So basically all those positive reviews, I've talked about the idea of, like, how coding boot camps can get away with having so many positive reviews. You're like, on course report, hold on, I'm going to open this. On course report, a lot of people ask, like, how the hell are there so many, like, 5-star reviews on course report? It's like, there are interesting things that coding boot camps executives do to field out negative reviews. And some will, like, say, oh, you had a bad experience, tell us about it. And it'll lead to an internal review versus, like, being a public review. But if it's positive, it's like, oh, you know, this really helps us, share it. And so there are a lot of creative things you can do, legal creative things you can do to, all right, at least I think legal. But anyways, very manipulative, unethical things you can do to encourage students to leave positive reviews over negative reviews. But a non-disparagement clause, like, if people are they have a contract that can punish them and, like, a non-disparagement clause is like a real thing. It's not something you could just be like, oh yeah, they can't do it. Yes, they can. Yes, they fucking can. I think people underestimate that. So I personally wouldn't trust the reviews, the number of positive reviews. The fact that there were so many negative reviews, even with that non-disparagement clause, like, people are pissed about Revature. People are actually pissed. That ratio should have been much more positive than negative. It should have been way more positive than negative. With that non-disparagement clause. I had someone that I reached out to that said that I had people who are like, I don't give a fuck about the contract with Revature. And I thought about bringing them on. To have them give their honest reviews. And I feel like a lot of people don't like, you're not attorneys, you're not lawyers. And I don't want to put my guests in that situation, even if they feel confident enough where they don't care. But I know there are people that are upset and that just flat out said, like, I don't give a fuck about that contract. So that's probably why you're seeing some of the negative reviews. It's all good. I put a red flag emoji. All right, cool. According to someone on Reddit, that non-disparagement clause applied to clients, customers, and potential customers while you work for them. Well, that's what I would imagine. Yeah, exactly. But that's your experience, right? But a non-disparagement clause is not talking bad about that. I would need to, like, I feel like I would need to see the clause for myself. If I got part of the contract, like, I would just give it to my attorney to take a look and show me, like, exactly what it meant. I wouldn't trust that. A non-disparagement clause is very powerful in shutting down anything negative. So okay, we know. At least judging from the reviews or the people that reached out to me on LinkedIn and what this guy's saying, it kind of matches up. Expect training to be rough. You're always treated, always at threat of being fired. Do you do your hair badly? Fired from training. Do you not speak up super well? Fired from training. Do you maybe not get a job offering right away from a contracted company? Fired. You better have savings in case you get fired. One batch saw the numbers go from approximately 25 to 18. Some people fired after the first week, some fired later on. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a relocation. And then when you lose your job, even if it's a mutual termination, you're kind of still stuck with your apartment, right? Wouldn't you be? How do you pay that apartment? You're still stuck in usually a year lease. I mean, I really don't know if they have any partnerships with housing or apartments across the United States. I didn't see anything like that. I think having a good amount of savings to get your butt back into I mean, if you want to stay in that state, sure, but like having a good amount of savings built up would be, I think that's a very wise decision. I think that was good advice. Yeah, Rio, I appreciate you sharing that with me. I would need to, I would need to see that clause. I don't believe that because they were scared. I mean, like, the thing is, the people that I reached out to have as a guest on the podcast, they were scared to say anything bad about Revature. And, a couple of them are like, I got to ask my manager, blah, blah, blah. And it just like, they were scared to even talk about Revature. It wasn't even about the companies. It was talk about Revature. Like, what are your pros and cons and your experiences of talking about Revature? And it's like, a lot of them just shut up. And then a few people were bold, like, I don't give a fuck. Like, kudos to you for being so bold, but I'm not, I just can't chance putting you in that position. All right. So compensation is almost always $45,000 per year after training, unless you go to Infosys. They only pay you $250 to move out to training location. They only pay $500 for you to move into the client location after training. During training, you get 8 hours. After training, you may move often, including every 3 to 6 months. So that was a common complaint we saw. It doesn't sound like that's changed. Yeah, unless you have savings, you're struggling to move your things. Hopefully, you either own nothing or don't care if you can't afford. So, I actually have a friend that moved to Thailand with nothing. He doesn't care about owning anything, and he rents. And his expenses for like trying to operate and build his business up are like way lower than mine, which I'm really impressed with. Some people are like that. If you literally don't feel like you have a home, you're willing to uplift that multiple times. Throughout your contract, you don't care. You really have no ties to anything. And you have a savings backed up. Maybe this is something to chance it with. I can't. I feel like this is highly going to taint your experience. Like, there are really good software engineering positions with good companies that care about you and aren't trying to hire you for cheap. And like, when you hire cheap labor, when a company is like trying to get cheap labor and get software engineers in for as cheap as possible, I very rarely hear about the culture being positive at a company like that. Very rarely. Sales and accounts teams are terrible. You get that information tomorrow. So poor communication is a common thing we've seen. HR team names redacted. Revature should look in HR how their employees treat. How to improve. Goal is a good one. So my point isn't simply to shit on them without constructive feedback. I sure hope Revature learns. So I think like that's the thing. It's like the goal seems to... The idea of Revature is something a lot of people want. The idea of it feels innocent. But there's so many innocent and well-intended ideas and platitudes, when poorly executed, screw people over poorly, like so badly. A non-disparaging clause is just, it feels like you're trying to hide something. That, like, if they didn't have that clause, if people that I reached out to with Revature, software engineers, they weren't scared to speak up, I would have a different perspective on this. That tainted everything. And that is completely a red flag. It's like that non-disparagement clause or whatever is scaring employees to speak up, this doesn't feel well-intended anymore. It just doesn't. It feels incredibly shady. That's even like people that I recommend if you have a savings. It's just, I'm ranting right now. I'm ranting. You all know my feelings about this. Revature, it's no secret you're hiring mainly fresh graduates. These are often people with little savings and a lot of student loans. Surely you can't expect someone to be able to move across the country. One person I know because I was paying like $800 a month. I was able to extend it. You can do things to extend your contract, and during... I don't even know if I could say the P word anymore. YouTube's like flags videos, but during this whole situation over the last 2 years, that might have made things a little bit easier because you can cancel your loans, but it just feels like the pay is really low if the target seems to be like a lot of college graduates. Like you don't go to Revature after college. That is the dumbest thing. Like once you've already invested money into that college degree, you literally are just upping your skills a little bit. You're making yourself more relevant. You're making sure your skills are more applicable. You're trying to work on more complex projects that are going to be relevant to the companies that you are trying to get a job with. Like you don't sign a 2-year contract. Like you're not in a desperate position as a CS grad. That is like whoever is like trying to say those are the people that should choose Revature. Like that is a horrible piece of advice. This is the last company you should be thinking about as a college graduate. Even a college graduate, even a non-CS degree, there's so many better options in my opinion. They ask 0 to 3 years experience and knowledge of SQL with Revature jobs. Revature job listings are so predatory, it's disgusting. They know people are desperate. That's the thing. It's attracting desperate people. That's what makes it feel predatory. If they were a high quality company and they like charged you, if they didn't pay you minimum wage, but they charged you for the educational opportunity and then did a better job at qualifying you into these positions, that would be way better than what they're doing. But they have you sign that contract early, offer you to pay minimum wage, and you could do at least the education remote. I don't know if they always have that remote, but it's attracting desperate people. That's what makes it predatory. That's what makes this whole thing disgusting. Even if that Reddit post is true, is it common for essentially a contractor to force non-disparagement clauses on their employees they're hiring out to others? I don't think it's common. It does happen. I don't think it's common. I don't think you should work for a company like that. I would never ever you'll get like a non-disclosure agreement and things talking about like you not leaking, especially like when you leave the company and you join another company that's in the same industry. You can get like conflicting. You could basically like get locked out of your industry if you're not careful or you're not in the right state that protects you with the right regulations. Illinois, where I worked, the contracts were a little bit less relevant because they protected their employees. I have a lot of complaints about like highly Democratic run states, and I don't really get political, but there are a lot of bad things that happen with mismanaging states like that. But one good thing I can say about Democratic states is they do seem to protect employees. They seem to protect creators, inventors, right? And they don't allow companies, or they put very strict regulations on companies, really locking you out and you feeling pressure to stay with that company. Or even like if you're working off hours, Illinois, it didn't even need to be in the contract, but if I was working off hours with my own equipment, whatever I created, the company didn't own it. But if you go to a little bit more right-leaning states, or states that aren't focused on protecting the individual, and it's I don't know. I shouldn't say right and left, because like there are Democratic states that run things a little bit differently, and there are Republican states that run things a little bit differently. But when you get to states, you should always expect, unless it's in the contract, that like anything you invent, any personal project, let's say you create a personal project, it takes off, you put a pricing model around it, you gain a user base, like it's very well possible that company now owns that. And they might not say anything until it takes off. Right. And so like, depending on like where you work with Google, like usually companies will have clauses of like, what are your current inventions, prior inventions? And then you communicate before you like take the steps necessary to create a new invention, to say, okay, I want to addend my contract and I want to say this piece of work is going to be mine. And you have to be very clear and as specific as you can be. And companies, I think Google's pretty good about that from what I've heard. But like there are a lot of other companies where, they're startups, they're about money at the end of the day, and they will take your inventions if they take off and become successful and claim that work as their own. So non-disparagement clauses, not so much from what I've seen, but more copyright laws and more contracts around who owns what based on your inventions, and like potentially being locked out of your industry because you are technically like a competitor now because you quit your company. You can't work for competing companies. What does that actually mean, right? So look at state regulations to protect you about stuff like that. But non-disparagement clauses, I'm less worried about. I see that way less often. In fact, I don't think I've seen a non-disparagement clause in a long time from any company contract that I look at. And if you do see one, I don't think that's common, and I do think that's at least a yellow flag, and you should talk to your potential employer about that. Only reason I ranted about that because that's a really important topic of like what, even just like trying to get a position, what you should be aware of. And maybe that's a live stream. I could dive into a lot of what I learned with that. Other companies are popping up. Rave Biz is another one. I heard another one as well. And you're right about that. It could be the next profitable thing. Yeah, I live in Connecticut, which is Democratic, obviously, and a couple IT companies I worked for had clauses like this one, which was a web application. And the beauty of it is, even if it doesn't have it in the contract, you look at the state regulations, and it's like they're never going to be able to enforce. Well, again, I'm not a lawyer. Don't take my legal advice seriously. Contact an attorney. But from what I learned about Illinois and what I understood is like, even if they didn't have that protection of the contract where you own that work, the state regulation would make it unenforceable. And they potentially would be breaking state regulations. So contact an attorney about it. This is all messy. No one thinks about this. They don't think about, like, a lot of people, they'll skim through the contract, and if they don't understand anything, they'll like ask the employer. Yeah, that's a good first step, but like you should contact an attorney before you're signing any contract. Any serious contract, any contract that's going to pay you like a salary is a serious contract. Any contract that's potentially going to cost you $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, that's a serious contract that's worth a conversation with an attorney. So it depends on the state. CT is very democratic, but maybe slightly more conservative on that side of things compared to California, maybe. Yeah, California and New York are big states where there are heavy contracts on coding boot camps, I believe. California has a lot of big contracts. So it is something to consider if you are considering a program in California, where it's more protection of the student, more lenient refund policies, stuff like that. It's something to be aware of. Oh, intellectual property clauses, whatever. Then yes, yeah, that is a common thing, and something to basically take over your inventions. And sometimes it's like weakly disguised as intellectual property, and it's not disguised; it's what it is. But like some of those clauses are very tricky to understand what's really happening. Austin, what don't coding boot camps want us to know about looking for? That's a longer conversation. That is. But hopefully some of this was, I guess I talked about getting a position. All right, so. Oh, in your case, it was the opposite. I was signing that anything I made, even on my own time, that was related to their product in any way they would. Well, that's true. If it's related to the product, even in states that we talked about, like it's still. They can have clauses like that. Regulations usually protect software engineers outside of company time, outside or normal hours of company time, outside of using company resources. Those are the two main things you want to look for. But again, we're going to move past this. Not an attorney. Don't take my advice seriously. Consult an attorney for this. But it's a really interesting conversation and something you should know about. All right, so what else? I am going to sum up kind of some of the things that I learned in my opinions about Revature. But we're going to finish reading this. It's no secret you're hiring mainly fresh graduates. These are often people with little in savings, a lot of student loans. Really can't expect someone to be able to move across country on $500. Looks like you can. One person I know spent $600 just on their flight to their client location. That didn't even cover hotel. More expensive food due to eating out. Ubers to their job due to being new to the area. Overhaul is just part of the organization. Find a way to help your employees move to these locations and give them the appropriate amount of time to find an apartment. This may even be 1 to 2. They don't even give that. That's ridiculous. Treat your employees with respect, and they will be happy. Honor your contract that states you are to give 5 full business days for an employee to move. If they start breaking the contract, this is where sometimes you can have an attorney have the conversation with them. Anything that they're breaking with the contract could break the entire contract potentially. That's why you should also understand the contract. There's a lot of reviews of, them not following through with what they promised with. If any of that is in the contract and they break it, and you want to get out of that contract, that's a conversation to have with your attorney. Not saying you're guaranteed to get out of that contract, but it's possible. Yeah, be specific about where an employee is moving and how long they'll be there. Employees should not be lied to about this, as they'll just end up getting into leases that they'll have to break. Training people with little in savings shouldn't have to worry every day if they'll make it through training or become homeless or have to ask their family for help. I have a feeling a lot of that might be happening. Be more open about how someone is doing in training. Your private color-coded grading system doesn't help someone improve. Yeah, the big complaint was a grading system. Okay, weekly interrogation was crossed out. Review by managers doesn't help someone improve because you don't give employees feedback. Because you don't give employees feedback? Feedback is... Okay, so it's... I don't know what the hell that is. Sounds like they focus more on telling them that they're doing bad rather than giving them constructive feedback. Is that what this person is saying? Let an employee know what's going on so that they can plan their future properly. If they're not doing as well as you like, they may be able to improve or at least plan a way home without major financial ruin. Compensation, per diem bonuses should be more nuanced. New York City, Boston, and San Francisco are not the only high cost of living areas in the U.S. Consider a tapered system where cost of living is considered county by county or city by city so that people in cities like Seattle still get assistance as Seattle is considered high COL. I don't know what COL, cost of living nowadays too. That's what I heard. Seattle had a high cost of living. I'm surprised about that one, but that's what I heard. Okay, so I feel like we have the gist of it, right? I think we have the gist of it. I think, is there anything else? Okay. I don't really care about this. Was that the same one? They constantly lie, tell misinformation. Is their bread and butter? You'll get that information tomorrow. Tomorrow comes. Was this the same one? No, this was the same one. I'm literally reading the same article, I think. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I am. I don't care. All right. So I think that's a good summary for me. I think I have a good gist of what Revature is, and I think I'm ready to share whether I think you should use it. Let me just catch up with chat real quick, and then I'll share my opinion. What the hell, Nightbot? Oh, you have time? Okay. Nightbot's is banning everyone. It's crazy. The thing is, like, it does help with spam, but it's timing people out for 5 seconds. I don't care about that. All right. What are your opinions? Before I share mine, what are your opinions? Like, honest opinions with Revature. Would you consider it as a serious option? I don't know how they made it work either, Rio. Apartment situation with these short contracts is definitely tricky. I wonder how travel contractors deal with this, even other industries like travel nurses. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, this isn't just in this industry with Revature. At least travel nurses are being paid much more usually than permanent employees, helps offset these costs. But in the case of Revature, they seem to be paying lower. Yeah. There are apartment complexes that specialize in renting to month to contractors. Near me, we have a lot of short-term military people who rent nice. So the thing, that is true, and a lot of those apartments are shit. They're complete shit. A lot of, like, the people that they attract don't, like, when you don't have a long residence at a place, you don't really have a lot of obligations. A lot of people will not take that seriously and kind of just, like, trash the apartment, and they won't necessarily treat, other neighbors with kindness. And I hear a lot of horror stories about, like, it just attracts a lot of people that they don't really care about the apartment complex. It's not like a home, you know what I mean? And when you get places like that are very temporary, this is why, like, a lot of apartment complexes ban things like, oh my God, I'm blanking on the name, where you rent out apartments for like a day. Geez, you know what I'm talking about. The thing. Why can I not think of the name? Remind me. Anyways, when you have services that I am blanking on that allow you to, like, rent out apartments and stuff like that, a lot of those are blocked in apartment contracts. When you have people that don't have long-term investments, Airbnb, thank you. Yes, when places like Airbnb, you'll see that. I saw that a lot in Chicago. The contracts would ban you from making your apartment like an Airbnb space, right? So I don't think that's a great place to live. And I hear a lot of horror stories about it. It can attract some shadier types too. It can attract some really kind, good people, but like that can be very inviting for people that are kind of just on the move and don't really care about the home that they live in. So you have to be careful about that. It's not as good of a situation as you think it is, just because it's financially okay for you. There are a lot of horror stories with contracts like that. So I personally, like, considering Revature, I wouldn't even consider that an option. If what they're saying, you're overworked, if that's actually true, you're coming home to a home that's completely noisy, music is blaring, people don't really care about the home that they live in. Like, I would never, ever want to put myself in that situation to be able to, like, actually think I can perform at work well. Like, you need sleep. You need a home that you can come home to that's peaceful and quiet. You have great neighbors. They take care of you. You take care of them. Places like that don't usually attract that kind of attention. So I don't think that's an option. You didn't say it was an option, but I just want to make that clear because people did bring that up. No, I'm early 30s with 2 kids getting into coding. No way I could ever move my family for that. Yeah, this does not feel like something for families to move and sign that contract if you have a family or any obligations, even debt. No, I'm not selling my soul to be a dev with something that appears to be a shortcut. So, Mara, good for you. I think, like Don suggested, if you are really determined to get in the industry, are young, single, no ties keeping you down, and like you said, you have a savings for security as you do this, then maybe. Rio, you basically just summed it up for me. Yes. Yeah. Airbnb, they're really, Airbnb's trash the places. When you have low commitment of it being a home, it's understandable. It's not even like it recruits shady types. It just recruits the shadiness out of people. They don't take care of it. If it's not your home, you're always going to take care of your own possessions more. If it's not your home, if it's not your community, it's like, it's understandable that you're not going to treat it like a home. You're not going to treat people. You should, but like, you know what I mean? It's something that you need to think twice of before you think it's a great financial option, because there are other cons of living in places like that. As a last resort, but it's not even guaranteed that you'll be a dev. If your heart is set on being a dev, then don't do it. I didn't see anything about their contract saying they guaranteed you a dev job either at the end of the 2 years. I don't even think they guarantee you employment, do they? With a contract? Maybe I'm wrong with that. You might even get the position you want. Oh, yeah, I changed my answer to a hard no. Oh, might not have wanted. Definitely don't do it. No, even with no debt, I wouldn't do it. I'd want to invest in worthwhile things with my money. Don't do it. Okay. Sounds like a lot of people are saying don't do it. Cool. So I could play devil's advocate and say, who would this be good for? I think Rio suggested it. There are people that are naturally, like, I think if you're younger, let me think about this. When I was younger, I would have taken any job. I remember telling family and friends, like, I would have taken a job and I would have lived in the crummiest place in Chicago to be able to live a full-time job, because I remember graduating college and I felt like no one would hire me. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I have massive student debt. No one's hiring me. I will take any job. I understand how people get desperate. That's one situation. And back then, I would have done something like this. Back then, I would have like literally lived in a hole in the ground to be able to get the experience to work. And I had the energy and the ambition to do it. I still have energy and ambition, but I don't know. I guess it's just me getting older. I've seen some really, really bad places in Chicago. I've seen some really, and I haven't had a lot of money growing up. I know a lot of people that have been in really tough spots. And even if you manage to get in a semi-safe neighborhood, which it might be tough with the salary that they're offering, you're still going to have so much financial stress. I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of stress financial pressure brings. And I think a lot of younger people underestimate that because you haven't had the life experience to go through it. Maybe you have, but more often than not, like, you see a lot more as you get older. And I've seen a lot of people, their lives completely ruined, their ambition killed. If you had any love for software engineering, it kind of just feels like you're like this cookie cutter system. Revature feels like a cookie cutter system where they're just training you the minimum that they have to. And, we saw those reviews of potentially encouraging you to line your resume just so you get hired to kind of like fulfill their end of the contract. If that's even in the contract, it feels like a it feels like a cookie cutter system to try to push software engineers into the industry as quickly as possible without caring about quality or your wellness, where you're living, your financial stress, you being happy at what you're doing. So if you are a nomad, like my friend that moved to Thailand, doesn't care about owning anything, is very resourceful at what you do, even someone like him, he would have made it work. And I think he would have hated the software engineering industry and never been a software engineer again. Software engineer, just like any other industry, if you are exposed to like the really terrible parts of the industry for long enough, that will completely taint your image of the industry. And it can change how you see the software engineering industry. It can change long-term goals and your prospects of the software engineering industry. And everything I'm about is teaching software engineers to be balanced, to financially prepare, to like care about their health and their well-being and their stress and mentality. And when you focus on a lot of those things in the beginning, you can have an amazing software engineer experience. It'll tailor the companies that you choose to work for. And like you can literally shape your entire future to have like this really, really bright future. But you have to focus on all this well-being stuff in the beginning. You have to focus on being financially stable in the beginning. If you don't do that, I see a lot of software engineers burn out. They quit. They go back to their old industry. And when you put that much time, 2 years into a program, into an industry, only to be completely just like expectations were not met, it's terrible, it's not what you thought it was, like that is a huge hit to a lot of people. And a lot of people don't really have the mentality to see that as just like a learning opportunity. Because, you know, we all have stresses. Like these last 2 years have been incredibly stressful for all of us. I think people highly underestimate the pressure that stress can bring. And Revature, especially during these times, does not feel like it produces healthy individuals. It feels like it, from what I've seen with the reviews, it feels like it just tears them completely apart and probably taints their experience with the software engineering industry. You literally have to, I feel like you have to be a masochist. You literally just have to not give a shit at all about where you're going to end up over the next 2 years and just kind of have this fuck it mentality and be financially prepared for Revature to possibly be an option. It's not like it can't get you positions. It's not like it can't get you the appropriate training, but you're gambling, right? We saw a lot of those reviews of all these, it depends on the manager you're getting. It depends on the trainer you're getting. You literally are gambling with your future with Revature, much more so than you would at a coding bootcamp. Like I covered some shady coding bootcamps in the past, and Revature feels way worse than anything else I've covered. Way worse. You hear about predatory ISAs and stuff like this is just like the whole package feels like a predatory ISA. It just feels, I personally cannot recommend this to anyone unless you are a glutton for punishment. I don't know how else to put that. I don't think it's good for anyone. Will it get you a job potentially? Yes. Will it probably taint your experience for the worse? Probably. I think there are much better solutions. I know sometimes a lot of people feel desperate and you just finally want to get into that industry. You have no idea how desperate I was to finally break into the software engineering industry. I almost quit several times. I can empathize with that. I think this program is going to hurt 95% of people more than it helps them versus other programs that they can choose. And all of this is complete speculation. We can't prove any of this until I see the contract. Revature, you are welcome to send me your contract. I will pay an attorney to analyze it, and I will correct myself with anything that I've mentioned. Show me your contract, and I am happy to do so. I don't think you're going to do it. So until that happens, and if that non-disparagement clause is true, it's a complete red flag. I would say no software engineer should consider this. None at all. I think it's a horrible idea. But I know this is going to be a past broadcast. If you watch this and you want to argue and you think that Revature is a really good solution or it was a good solution for you, feel free to leave it in the comments. Happy to look those over. So those are my opinions. I know this is long-winded and we got to do a little bit of research. We looked at some reviews. I mainly did a bigger chunk of research before the live stream, but hopefully this helped. I have fun doing live streams like this. Okay. A lot of you are kind of mimicking what I'm saying. So, if maybe that is what a lot of people are thinking, but if anyone disagrees, feel free to leave it in the comments below. And everyone, thank you so much for being here. I kind of want to do more research-based live streams like this where I kind of just pull stuff up and share my perspectives based on what I'm seeing real time. I think this is fun. I think there are a lot more companies and parts of the software engineering industry that we can dive into. I think it could be really fun to dive into. Let's pull up a contract and have an attorney, like a kind of a predatory contract for a software engineering position, have an attorney go over it, like have them like explain how powerful state regulations are and where some can be bent, and like if they can be bent. I think a lot of this execution, you need to dive into the legality of some of it to really understand what you're getting into. But I'll think about it. We'll figure that out. Anyways, thank you so much for being here. I hope you did enjoy this. If you agree, I appreciate all of your opinions. If you disagree, I appreciate those as well. But we will be live. I got to think about what live stream I want to do for next Friday. I usually come up with the idea on Monday. So if you do have any ideas of what you want me to go over, we'll do them next Friday. So thanks, everyone. Good luck on all of your projects, and happy coding. Take care.